And we are live. Yes, we are officially live with Kat McDowell from Los Angeles. Kat, hello.
Hi.
Kia ora. Kia ora from the homeland.
Kia ora. Oh man, it's, when I hear Māori now, and I feel like I've missed out on this whole decade or so of New Zealanders learning to speak Māori. Like I don't understand any of it.
Well, you were. So let's take 3 steps backwards before we go 10 steps forward.
Yeah.
You were born in Japan, raised in New Zealand.
Yes.
I probably knew you, 15 years ago. Would that be about right?
Yes.
Something like that.
That would be accurate.
And you were making it huge in the New Zealand music scene, and you decided to take your skills back to your country of birth and do music in Japan. Yeah?
That's right. Yeah.
But now you've obviously smashed the world when it comes to Japan, because now you're based out of Los Angeles.
I am. Yeah. Yeah. It's been crazy. I mean, when I was like 13, I dreamed of coming to LA, and then while I was living in Japan, it didn't even cross my mind to be here.
Yeah.
But now I'm here, and I've been here for six years now.
Is it that long in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
So that's now
Time flies.
That's now home, because I don't know. For a while, I guess I was kind of under the impression, obviously wrongly, that you were sort of still based in Japan, but kind of traveling backwards and forwards. But it's the other way around, is it? You're based in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I've been based here for about 6 years,
Yeah.
and then went to Japan once or twice a year to tour.
And that so your music that you're playing now, is it mostly in English, mostly in Japanese, a mixture of the two?
I would say it's roughly like 95% English, 5% Japanese. Maybe 90% English, 10% Japanese.
I know when you come back to New Zealand, there's often chances for you to do, like, you came back here for like an expo, for a Japanese expo or something like that. Does that happen? That must be a bigger market in Los Angeles. Like, so for example, Hawaii is heavily influenced by Japanese people. Is there like
Yes.
a market in LA for a Japanese singer-songwriter doing Japanese music?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was living in Japan, I would often play, I did a lot with the New Zealand embassy.
Right.
And so I would often play at like at New Zealand events in Japan. And then, there was one time the New Zealand embassy invited me to come and play at this thing that they told me was really important. And I ended up performing for one of the princesses, like one of the Japanese princesses. It was so crazy. But yeah, so I was doing a lot to represent New Zealand in Japan. And now that I'm here, I'm representing Japan and New Zealand here in California. And now when I go back to Japan, I represent California and New Zealand. So I do find myself being invited to play at like California Day or like New Zealand events. And here I end up playing at, Japan Day and things like that.
And when people find out that you're from New Zealand, or you have an association with New Zealand, do they ask you about still Flight of the Conchords and Taika Waititi? Are they the two big questions? Or is Flight of the Conchords a bit sort of last decade now?
Yeah, maybe people haven't been asking me about Flight of the Conchords as much. Taika Waititi, no one's really asked me about him yet.
Okay.
Maybe people have just kind of used to, people in LA are just so used to people from all over the place. And so I don't get too many references these days. They're just more like, they hear the slight New Zealand twang that I still kind of have. I know I don't really have much anymore. And they're like, oh, girl, where are you from? And then when I say Japan, they just look at me really confused, because I know that for people who are listening, they can't see me right now, but I look very white. I don't look Japanese at all. So they listen to my accent, and then if I say Japan, they're like, what? No, what? What? And so I say New Zealand.
So yeah, I was going to say, so is that what you do? Someone says where you're from, do you say New Zealand by way of Japan through to Los Angeles, or?
So it depends on if I want to keep the conversation short or long.
Okay.
If I want to keep it short, I'll just say New Zealand, because that's where the accent is from, obviously. And usually go, oh, that's so nice. I so want to go to New Zealand one day. Or, oh, I went to New Zealand for my honeymoon. Or, I hear things like that. Or if I really feel like confusing people that day, I'll tell them I'm from Japan.
It seems that a lot of the world wants to come to New Zealand at the moment. Did you?
Oh yeah.
Did you have any thoughts yourself about sort of packing up and coming back here during this current crisis? Did it go through the? Did you have to think about it?
Well, I didn't, but my parents, who are in New Zealand, have, almost every day before New Zealand shut its borders, they were like, so, do you want to come back? You should really come back. Did you know they're going to close the border soon? Here's the last chance, But I don't know. I just feel like there were so many people traveling all over the world, and it's not like I'm a tourist or visitor here, so it felt like the safest thing for everyone would be for me to just stay where I am, because what if I was infected and I took it back to New Zealand?
Yeah.
It didn't make sense for me to go back, at least at this point in time.
And what is life like in Los Angeles? I mean, we're getting, Trump's daily soap opera updates over here. But actually, and obviously, different states are doing different things. You're in California.
Yeah.
California seems to be one of those states who are doing, more of a, isolate yourself, social distance if you can. How is it going for you at the moment, and how's it feeling like in your neighborhood?
Really quiet. There's less fire trucks and stuff too. Obviously, there's probably less accidents, which is great. But it's very quiet. I'm so used to a lot of traffic noise. The skies are really clear, which is beautiful because LA does have a lot of smog from a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And we really don't go out much. I was really sad that they closed the beaches because I do love surfing, when this first started happening, I was looking it up and going, can you catch viruses from salt water? And at the time that people were still surfing, but it was raining a lot. And in California, when it rains, because it doesn't rain very often, you don't want to go in the water right after the rain. There's a lot of runoff. It's pretty gross out there.
Right.
So I was waiting for the rain to settle, and then the week that I was going to go get out there again, they closed all the beaches, and I think there was a surfer out there. I mean, he deserved it because he swore at the lifeguard who told him to get out of the water, but he got fined $1,000
For going surfing?
Yeah, well, I think typically what would happen is I think you get a warning, then you get fined $100, then you get fined $200, etc.
So he was a repeat offender.
It was the very
offender.
first day, but I think the lifeguard said, "Hey, you should get out of the water," and then the surfer was like, "F you, what are you going to do about it?" And there was a policeman right there who was like, "He's not going to do anything about it. I'm going to do something about it." So, yeah.
Are you finding? I was having a chat with someone the other day about, the protests and stuff that are going on in America. I said one of the things about America though is. Actually, I was talking with a New Zealand comedian who's currently living in New York. We did a podcast with him. And the point he made, which was, I think, good to say sort of publicly, is he sort of thinks about America a bit more like it's more comparable to the UN, not the UN, sorry. The UN. No. Europe. Anyway, I'll call it Europe. Yeah, because it's 50 individual states, like 50 individual countries, with a governing body over the top, which is the federal government, which is like the EU, I guess that's what I was thinking, not the UN, the EU.
Yeah.
Like the EU is the governing body over the top. So much like countries in Europe are having different rules and situations, so are the states in America. But we look at it as one big group, and I think that's problematic to some of the news that comes out. So we see these protests from people who don't want to be socially distanced, but in a population of 340 million people, it's easy to find pockets of 50 people here, 100 people there, 1,000 people there, and make it look representative.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Totally.
It's not necessarily. So what I was going to ask you is that a big vibe at the moment, the kind of protests against the shutdown, or is it a few isolated issues here and there and it's not representative?
The last few days, I just got burned out from the news.
Right.
So I haven't paid enough attention to know, except, it's interesting being on Facebook because you have, or at least I like to have a variety of friends.
Yep.
So it's interesting when you see different things being shared by different friends. And I have a lot of Asian American friends. And so there are a lot of Asian Americans here who are struggling just scared because there's not so much, but there's a handful of very racist people who are just very upset and looking for people to blame.
Sure.
And when you have a tribal mentality, like someone's got to blame, then they'll blame anyone who looks Chinese. But so there's some people dealing with that, and there's I don't know. There's just so many opinions and so much going around and so much distrust, I think. That's one thing I noticed as a New Zealander living, and even as someone who's lived in Japan and New Zealand living in the US, is the political system is really different. People are very, very passionate here, to the point that it can be a little polarizing, or I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but the impression that I get is that there are a few extremes where it's like loyalty to party and over all the different, it's almost like they can't see, the different issues, or, or if they do, they kind of are blind to it, or they turn a blind eye to it. And so that's just been an interesting thing to watch on as an outsider and someone who can't vote. And someone who really hates to get into heated arguments.
I think as an outsider, though, looking in, you bring a perspective, because I think that's what a lot of us see outside of America. We kind of go, the classic example is, Mr. Trump, President Trump, that all of a sudden all these people who were standing, like the evangelical right, so to speak, bless them, but they will stand up for the family and will stand up for all these principles that then he didn't seem to represent, but they then all of a sudden picked him and supported him because of party, like you're saying, because it seems that party comes first, which is kind of weird. And especially in this climate, I mean, it doesn't even feel like country should come first, but like as we sit here right now, it almost feels like humanity should come first, because this is not an Arkansas problem or an American problem or a North American problem or a Northern Hemisphere problem. It's a world issue, and it feels like we should just be thinking about, humanity is the outcome right now, not the election at the end of the year for both, I guess, America and New Zealand, not winning points on are we right, are we wrong. We here in New Zealand have got a big decision coming today. 4:00 this afternoon, New Zealand time, they're going to decide, are we coming out of the lockdown or not?
Yeah.
And, it seems that in this situation, there's no correct, perfect answer, but if the governing bodies can get as much right as possible of what is right and get as little wrong as possible from bad decisions, that's about as good as we can hope. So I kind of, there was a scientist that came out today saying if New Zealand wants to eradicate this, we need to stay in lockdown for another 2 weeks. And I was like, I'd be okay with that, but I know that if that was the decision, the dissent will start to flow more readily, because for some reason, people want their McDonald's back. God knows why, but they do,
Is McDonald's closed?
Yeah, everything's closed, man. Like, there are no restaurants, there are no bars, there are nothing open.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a proper, like, I'm sitting in my bedroom, so I'm not in my studio. You're welcome to my bedroom. So I can't go to my studio, even though that's like just me and just in one room.
Wow. So you can't even get in the car.
Well, no, the essential travel only. So in the past 4 weeks, I've been in the car 3 times, and they were all 2 times. Two times and 2.5 times. Like, I got in it once halfway through to give it a run, a kilometre up the road and back, just to turn over the engine. But only done things twice, which was go to a fresh fruit and veggie store twice. That's it. So that's the only time I've been in the car in 4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you can't even go to a studio, even though it's just you.
Nope. Can't. Not allowed to. Essential travel only. And I get level.
So they would stop you? They would pull you over?
People have been getting pulled over, but obviously there are cars on the road because you are allowed to go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
So, and I'm allowed to go and get fresh fruit and veggies, but people have been pulled over. Easter weekend, the police were out in force because people wanted to go to their batches in their cribs, and they were like, "No, you can't do that." So level 4 here was such a lockdown that they said you're basically only allowed in your neighbourhood. If they go to level 3, which signs are pointing towards, but as I said, I'd be okay to stay at level 4. But if they go to level 3, they're saying you can, as long as you stay regionally, that's okay. So like right now, I've got family in Auckland, I'm in Dunedin. My father turns 80 in May, so no way I can get to Auckland for that. And obviously there's no way he can have a party anyway because of the reduction in numbers. But if we go from 4 to 3, level 4 to level 3, things like drive-throughs and non-contact shops can open again. So McDonald's, woo, for some people, will be open, but only drive-through. And the advice now is basically you have to work from home unless you're an essential service. The advice for level 3 is if you can work from home, ensure you do, which kind of means for me, I mean, I'm working now. This is my job sort of thing. So I've unfortunately on some level kind of proven that I can work from home. So that means if it's level 3 for 4 weeks, I'm still here.
Yeah.
But maybe not in my bedroom.
Wow.
I might build a space downstairs, I think.
Yeah. Wow. See, that's new news for me. I didn't realize it was that strict. Here, some restaurants, as long as they could do no contact, or social distancing. So I've got takeout. We've been on lockdown for 40 days.
Wow.
Maybe, I don't know, 35. It's definitely been over a month now.
Yeah.
And I think we've done takeout twice. It was both from the same place. But they had masks. We now all have to wear masks.
Right.
I still had a bunch from Japan, thankfully. So, in Japan I wore masks all the time.
Right.
And on planes, I always wore masks on the planes because the air gets so dry.
Right.
So it was just great. It was like a humidifier,
Yeah.
And so anyway, so everyone wears masks, and and then the restaurants that can kind of still do takeout, but it's try to be contactless, so no cash. Like they have a little card thing out, and it's outside. So at the door entrance to the shop, they have a table out, and they have the takeout, and so we pick it up and do the card thing and
You're right.
wait from a distance.
So it sounds like our level 3 will be something akin to what yours is now.
I think so. Yeah.
Like I think they've said no face to face, so I wouldn't be able to go into a bar and get a beer across the counter, but I could go to the supermarket and buy a half dozen beers from the liquor department in the thing. So still some restrictions. I heard someone call it the other day level 3.9. Level 3 is really level 3.9 and level 4 because it feels like lots of the restrictions are still very similar. Basically, it's stay inside if you can. You only leave the house if you have to for work or for whatever.
How about outside? Do people go on walks?
Heaps and heaps.
So that's allowed. Because I think people still need to get sunshine. It's like you need sunshine, you need exercise because we're trying to keep ourselves healthy, right? So it's that's important.
It appears that every garden in New Zealand will have been weeded and cut, and it'll be the most beautiful. It's like the Christchurch is a garden city. We will be the garden country by the end of this because everyone's done all their weeds and all their trimming because they've been filling their time in. I live in a part of Dunedin that's quite flat. A lot of Dunedin is a bit like Wellington. It's quite hilly. So out onto the main road, heaps of people walking. It's funny though, people walking in the middle of the road with their dogs and, just so they don't have to brush up against someone. So the social distancing thing here is what I've witnessed, which is, I guess, my neighbourhood, because that's what we've been restricted to, has been quite noticeable. As I say, my road out here goes down to a main road, and you see people walking up the middle of the road, not on the footpath with their dogs. I went for a walk yesterday, ended up at the dairy and got some bits and bobs, got some bread. And you're only allowed one person in the dairy at a time, so everyone else has to wait outside.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
I was...
because the dairies are so tiny.
Yeah, and I was walking back towards my house, and there was a elderly lady coming towards me with two little dogs, so walked out on the road around the parked car and then back onto the footpath to let her walk through with her dog. So, yeah, it's interesting because in saying all of that, the government's just done 1,000 kind of spot tests. They went into supermarket car parks in Queenstown and Christchurch and I think Waikato, maybe Auckland as well, and every case came back as there was no positives. They were all negative. So it also seems that perhaps, we're stumping it pretty well. I don't know. I mean, I'm conservative when it comes to risk, I think. I'd rather stay an extra week and be 100% sure than come out a bit early. And I mean, Japan was looking okay, for example, and then they got a bit of a take-off. Singapore came out and they got a bit of a take-off, so I'd rather nail it myself.
Yeah. And I guess it's just, it's going to be really painful especially for some people, and for a long time, you know, and I mean, I'm more of the belief that if we just nip it in the bud and have a short time of extreme, which I really feel like New Zealand was able to do, partly because of the location in the island,
I think so,
and the population, and it's great, and it's going to be really hard for New Zealand to now let people back in for the same reason. So New Zealand will probably have to isolate for a long time, which is going to be hard for the tourism industry. But thankfully there's still a lot of dairy and a lot of export. And
we've got plenty of food to feed ourselves. So
yes, that's great.
But if you came back today, like if your parents said come back and you were like, okay, it's time, Trump's gone mad, let's go back. And I know that we can't say that because you've probably got some fans who love Trump, and bless them. He's just not my cup of tea. You would be put into a hotel for 2 weeks to isolate. So that's what's happening now. So it means that, for example, our professional sports teams, the Warriors, the rugby league team, are going to Australia. They're going to base themselves in Australia. And to do their season, because if they don't, that means every time they came home, they'd have to isolate for 2 weeks in a hotel. So they're going offshore to actually base themselves in northern New South Wales for whatever the season's going to be, if it's going to be one.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a fascinating time. And I was watching the news last night. Unlike yourself, I typically take my news source intravenously. Both world and American political news tends to go in intravenously. So I was watching the news last night, and I saw a World Vision couple working in Afghanistan, and also the conversation talking about Africa, and it hasn't really hit Africa yet. And I'm like, holy moly. When you talk about social distancing and they have maybe 5, 10, 15 people living in a house, and what did they say? They might have said Liberia has 3 ventilators in the whole country. And some of these
and access to running water.
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you wash your hands if you haven't got access to running water? Yeah. And I just thought, man, it started in China and they had this spike and down, and I, respectfully, in America at the moment, that seems to be ground zero, and it's going to keep going. And God help Africa is all I can say, because you saw what happened with Ebola there, is they didn't have the capacity to deal with that. This is going to be worse, and it's still to come.
Yeah.
So it's pretty horrific, and what a cheery thing to talk about, seeing how we haven't talked for quite a while.
Yeah.
So what else? What are you doing at the moment? You're singer-songwriter-ing, and you have a style, and we should have set up like a little video to play here. Maybe I'll insert something afterwards and re-upload it. And is this your you said you're teaching as well? You said it to me before we came on board, eh? What is your teaching?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I have all these instruments behind me. This is where I teach from. I teach ukulele, I teach guitar, I teach singing, songwriting, and now I have quite a workload of teaching, which is amazing. It's something that I love, and it's great because I've had so many years of doing it as a performer and as a songwriter, and still am. Yeah. And so to be able to mentor people from all ages to do this. I also teach at Musicians Institute in Hollywood, and so to be able to teach there too, there's a lot of up and coming, amazingly talented young musicians there that I also get to mentor and teach. So that's really fun. Oh yeah, I was just telling you, I teach a YouTube class and social media class there. So there's a lot of things that I get to do. And then funnily enough, once everyone went on lockdown, I also tour and play at colleges around the US. Right. So a lot of colleges book me, and sometimes my husband comes and we do a duo thing. And all of those gigs obviously are cancelled. I mean, I think I was supposed to be in Hawaii this weekend playing at Spam Jam, and that got cancelled. I was sad about that. We cancelled our Japan tour. Well, we cancelled everything.
Yeah.
But then it just kind of hit me. I released a song recently called Thousand Paper Cranes, which was inspired by my grandma, who is Japanese, and she's the one who, my mother is not really creative with her hands or musical, but my mother's mother loved to do things with her hands like origami and loved to sing. And so she had dementia for the last 10 years of her life.
Wow.
But I would go, after watching a documentary called Alive Again, I was so inspired by how music can bring people with Alzheimer's and dementia kind of back to life. You know, if you play them some music that they grew up listening to, they come back to life. And so it's like, I want to go and sing with Grandma again. So I would go visit her, and she wouldn't know who I was, but I'd say, hey, let's sing, an old Japanese song. And so I used to post these videos, so cute, these videos up to YouTube of me singing with my grandma in Japanese, these old school Japanese songs. And last year she passed away at 96. And the day after she passed away, I had a writing session with my friend Nitani Paris, and so I turned up at her house just bawling, and she's like, I don't know what to do. Let's write a song about this. So I was just sharing about my, what her house felt like. She lived in this 140-year-old Japanese house.
Wow.
and then we wrote the song, Thousand Paper Cranes. So it already had the vision for the music video in my mind as soon as we wrote it, and it took a year almost to produce and make, because we needed an old Japanese home, and we needed, we had to fold. A whole team of people helped me fold 1,000 or more paper cranes, and it was a big production, the biggest thing I've ever had to do. So we recreated this kind of scenes with me and my grandma when I was little. And because I just released the song 1,000 Paper Cranes. This is going back to what I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because I released the song 1,000 Paper Cranes, I thought, hey, and we're all on lockdown. It's like, why don't we have a paper crane folding party on YouTube? So I taught everyone how to fold paper cranes, and we folded paper cranes together as a part of a live stream. And then I thought, this would be so wonderful if I could do this on Zoom, and if I could actually see everyone's creations and help people real time. So then after all these shows started getting canceled, I said to my college agent, I said, hey, I have this idea where I could maybe teach people how to fold stuff from Zoom. And he goes, that's a great idea. So he started pitching it to all of these colleges, and they loved the idea. So I've already started teaching these workshops at different colleges, because they're all on lockdown and they're all studying by themselves. So it's just as a way to build community and learn a new skill, and paper is accessible to everyone. And so it's been really fun. So now I'm teaching these workshops too. It's keeping me pretty busy.
Oh, and when you say you're teaching them, are they like behind a paywall? Are they a masterclass where people pay a membership, or do you get financial from it, or are you just doing it as a service?
The ones that I've done on my live stream for my fans have been just as a service.
Yep.
Let's do this.
Yep.
And I would still like to keep doing those. And but the colleges pay me to come, and it's an exclusive thing just for their students.
Right.
So as part of their campus activities, they hire me to come virtually and teach them origami.
So you kind of go,
you
sort of go behind the college paywall and into their inner sanctum of student network sort of thing, virtual network. That's too cool.
And exclusive to them. So if they have a college mascot or something, and maybe or something from their city, maybe I can come up with something that they can fold. Or I've had requests for Pokemon. This ended up being too hard. This was my attempt at a Pikachu.
It's pretty good.
This was going to be way too hard to fold with them, so I chose an easier Pikachu.
Right. So
and now people are like, you should do TikTok. So I'm going to start an origami TikTok.
That could be massive. That'd be
could
great.
be really fun. Yeah.
So
it's been.
So as an artist, are you? I don't mean to talk business, but it's where my brain goes. So, do you look to build your fan base doing this kind of thing and then monetize that, like with sales, album sales and concerts, or do you look to do this as something that can be its own little sort of side hustle on its own?
You mean the origami thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the fact that people bring me out for workshops has become a side hustle that I didn't even dream of.
Yeah.
It just happened 2 weeks ago, and it's been so popular that I've already booked 8, and I've already done 2. And this was an idea that came 10 days ago.
I'm talking to Susie Cato later this week.
Yeah.
You know, it's our time, kia ora talofa, because New Zealand has started almost an educational television network.
Yeah.
Because then, like, kids can stay at home. I'm going to tell her about, and she's involved. That she's one of the people they went to. You could totally do something like this, a little workshop or something, and put it on, you know, as a segment. I'm thinking about, you know, a kids TV show with a segment learning how to fold something. That would be amazing.
It's so good. And some things like this box that I'm showing you, I mean, these are little practical things. I've got like a pick holder box right now. It could be a gift box. So there are like these kind of really practical things to things that are just pretty. Like these flowers are things that I think you might even find at Chinese restaurants, but they're made out of napkins, you know, like there's just so many different cool things that you could do that is fun. And I have been thinking about how I can do this more for kids. And you know, some people were like, I would love to volunteer too, you know, when there's time and help out, especially when it comes to kids, because I feel like this is really important.
So I saw your paper crane one, and that takes 2 minutes to make.
Well, you know,
or are you just very quick
cranes,
at it? You might be very quick at it, are you?
Yeah, well, you know, paper cranes are the standard thing that most Japanese people. But you know what? I don't even know if most Japanese people know how to fold them.
Right.
It's the typical folding thing, but they're actually not the easiest thing to fold. I think this is easier to fold than a paper crane. And so the box that I showed you is easier than a paper crane. Paper cranes are really fun, and they're not that hard, but they're not the easiest thing. So I don't usually start with a paper crane.
I think it's so interesting in society today, and even more so. I mean today, like as in 2020, but also specifically right now. It's fascinating what people are coming out with as a form of content or entertainment or new jobs or new opportunities. And we've talked a lot on this podcast about media and what's going to happen with the media out the back of this coronavirus crisis, and how it feels like maybe and hopefully New Zealand has started to catch up with the rest of the world. We can do these things from home. For a long time, New Zealand has been, we've now got the capacity to work remotely, but New Zealand never has really gone that path. It's almost like we've got a little bit of that British in us where we've kind of gone, we can't leave the peasant workers at home by themselves. They won't do any work. But at the end of this, what I'm hoping is that big businesses will see, actually, these people are as effective, if not more effective, working from home. And that sort of thing will become more prevalent. Things like people doing independent broadcasts or, being a decent source of content, not having to rely on necessarily the big networks, etc., etc., etc. America's brilliant at, for example, having their radio hosts work from home. No radio host in America goes into a studio. They have a studio built in their house and they just network to them all. And I think that's amazing, and that's a great way to work. And at the end of this coronavirus shutdown, and I don't mean New Zealand, I mean across the globe, I wonder if there's going to be a whole bunch of new jobs, new innovation, new ways of doing things, reintroduce things that are going to benefit us as a people and society in general. I mean, working from home, if you can do your job from home, let's say you live in Auckland. I mean, Dunedin's a bit different because everything's 5 minutes here, but if you're living in Auckland, wouldn't you rather work 9 to 5 at home and not have to leave the house 8 in the morning and get home at 6 at night?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it seems good for business, good for the personal life, good for the family, win-win-win.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I think a lot of things are going to change, and especially in LA too, is that maybe some of these companies will realize that, we don't need to pay for a building in the middle of Beverly Hills. And some people are gonna work really well remotely, and some people are gonna have a really hard time. And I know I did talk to somebody actually in my origami workshop the other day who was saying that it takes him a lot longer to work now because he can't just see his co-workers face to face anymore, but he has to do quite a long run around. So I guess for some people it's either reworking how to be efficient and how to communicate efficiently when you don't get to be face to face. But I know that for some people and some businesses, it really does help to be in a different environment. And as somebody who has worked from home a lot, it's nice to have a separate working space too.
Yeah.
And so creating that, not that I've ever had that, but I think it would be nice one day.
Well, I've worked from home for a long time, but I've had a couple of times where I've had offices or studios. Like I've got a studio in central Dunedin at the moment, but if I can't use it, I have to question, is it viable? The building that it's in is amazing, and they've supported us in making this thing, and they've supported us all the way through. I'm incredibly loyal to them. But if this was to go on, let's say I wasn't able to get to it really for the rest of the year, or let's say because of the lockdown, there are no people coming through Dunedin to converse with, to have a conversation with, because we've been told to stay regional until the end of the year. I think it's not going to happen, but if that was the case, then I'm really going to have to question it. And I don't want to leave the environment that I've just literally finished building like a week before the lockdown. Oh, there's my alarm going off. I was going to get sprung at some stage, wasn't I? But in saying that as well, the idea I've got a downstairs sort of family room, about walling off a third of that and turning it into the studio at home. And I mean, like as in not like this, makeshift, actually turning it into a proper, multi-camera, multi-mic'd studio at home. Something about that's pretty bloody exciting too, to be able to go. Like I'm having a chat tomorrow with Brad Owen, who's a professional poker player out of Las Vegas. Yeah. For someone to come back to me and go, oh, look, you can have such and such, but you got to go now. And for me to go, okay, well, I'll just walk 18 meters downstairs to my studio and let's go for it, sort of thing. Something quite exciting about that as well.
Yeah. Well, technology is letting us do all this now. The fact I love Zoom. I know Zoom is the thing right now. It's great.
Yep.
And through just learning about being a YouTube creator and going to all these workshops, you learn how to light yourself and how to just make an environment that looks good on camera, I guess. And so if everybody can do that and have good sound, then that's then it makes everyone's job a bit easier. We don't all have to be in the same place. I know that a lot of celebrities are loving it because they can be on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show and not have to leave the house.
Totally.
And people who are watching it love it because they get to see Jimmy Fallon with his family and they just get to, I don't know if it would continue this way, but I am sure that all the comments I've been seeing is, the TV execs aren't going to want to go back to, what it used to be when they see that.
Oh, and I think what Zoom has done is it's the final iteration of home studios, really. I'm speaking into it. This is not one of my good mics. This is like one of my B mics. This is just a Rode Podcaster. I've got better mics in my studio. But I'm running it through a desk and then, going back through broadcast software as well as through Zoom. And I could be... The sound, I know the sound coming out of this is basically studio quality, much like yourself. So it sounds like if people just listen to this on iTunes, like listen to the audio version, you could be in the room with me because you have a decent mic, I have a decent mic. And in the old days, working in radio, 10 years ago, to have a decent quality line from outside of the studio took quite a lot of professional equipment. Whereas now, if you've got a decent mic and you've got Zoom, you can dial into any studio, television, or radio anywhere in the world, and all they've got to do in the radio studio is put up the audio fader from this feed, and you can be talking to them in real time. I think that this is kind of the wake-up call. I think things will change after this lockdown, especially in New Zealand, where, for example, radio hosts can go, well, I'll just build a studio at home from now on. I wonder if that's going to happen. Like I used to work for NZME, and when I was working in the Cook Street building, which they no longer have, the building they have now is bigger and more expensive. I think it was 4 stories. 4 stories in central Auckland, 54 Cook Street. gosh, who knows? Each of those floors must have been 200 square meters.
Yeah.
And, you could have an office with all the technical stuff, and you could have people working from home. That must reduce your outgoings by, I don't know, let's say 5 to 10 million a year straight away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah,
but then what do
totally.
I know?
Yeah.
So the word in Los Angeles at the moment is you've got this freedom to get around. Are there any talks or anything about when gigs and that will start coming back, or have you been doing online gigs? What have you been doing yourself?
Yeah, I've done a couple. I did one recently it was called the Uncancelled Festival, and I think
Right.
it might still be happening. And I think even if venues, and if anyone is listening and owns a venue in New Zealand, or just wants to curate, I think it might be a continuing thing. I need to check, but it's called the Uncancelled Festival, and it was basically just to help venues, because I was mentioning people who suffer the most, and I actually think it's the venues more than the artists, because artists can, I mean, a lot of people do live gigs now for tips and all sorts of things, and it's the venues can't do anything. And so, but they've got to pay rent on a building that they can't do any business out of, and possibly employees too. And now the mayor of LA is considering, I haven't heard if it's for sure yet, but he's considering cancelling all shows for the rest of the year and all sporting events. So
I've heard that too. I've heard him say
Yeah.
nothing till 2022, and of course the owner of the Lakers went, "What? You can't do that." But,
2022?
yeah, I thought I heard that him say that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
I feel like it's
2021.
too soon to say 2022.
Let's not put,
but-
let's not put out fake news, eh?
I'm not sure, but
I'll have a look
uh,
while we're talking. Yeah, because one thing I do hate is that fake news. I just had it again this morning. Someone telling me about how something in tonic water is the latest cure for coronavirus. And the thing that frustrates me more than anything else is it took me one search 15 seconds to find the debunking of this point. And people just post things all the time.
people are constantly sharing, and so I tend not to share those types of things.
People talk about how, here we go. I've got it right here. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said, it's 2021. Large gatherings like sporting events or concerts may not resume in the city before 2021 as the US grapples with the coronavirus. So there, you're right, 2021. And it's people talk about the death of the news and the splurge of fake news and how social media is doing all, and it's like, no, a person has to post that. I with the greatest respect to this person, then say something really horrible about them. So I'll just say I won't say either of those things. They had to choose to go, oh look, this is that someone says that I can cure coronavirus with bloody tonic water. I'll post that. So it's and like I said, I put the element in tonic water, put coronavirus, and the very first result that came up was saying how it's not. It's fake. All I'm asking is people, do your research. Just research. Just search it once before you post it.
Yeah.
One search.
Yeah.
One search, please.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to check that, because I really do. I hate putting out wrong information if at all necessary. So yes.
Yeah.
So 2021. That's a long time away, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, and at the same time, it's not. It's now. I mean, when this first happened, I thought the lockdown would be 2 weeks,
Right.
and then it was a month, and now it's going to be 2 months.
Yeah.
And now, potentially it could be more beyond that. And at the very least, even if we go back to whatever life is, there aren't going to be concerts for us as musicians, live events. I don't know. So I really felt like at the beginning of the year, I usually pray at the beginning of the year and say, God, what's the theme? And I felt like God said to me, your theme this year is to let go. And I'm like, you know what? Let go means so many different things. And so with almost every situation, I have to ask myself, okay, what does let go mean in this particular situation? But it's been it's kind of just exactly what I needed. It's made this year incredibly easy for me because I haven't really held on to anything and just kind of, you know, at first I wasn't going to tour Japan, and then a few conversations we had into the beginning of the year, it looked like we were going to tour Japan.
Right.
And so I had to let go of the thought of not touring Japan.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm in. All right, we're in. And then a few months later, or a month or two later, this, you know, the coronavirus hit Japan. And then we hadn't announced the tour yet, thankfully.
Yep.
And so like, okay, let go of that. Cool. So I was like, okay, cool. And then we got all booked for all these shows in the US instead. I was like, that's awesome. And then a few weeks later, the virus caught up here, and all those got canceled. I was like, okay, cool. Whatever happens, like, it's all good. So it's been great for me to have those words to hold on to. That this year for me is just like a let go, let God do whatever is happening. Not that I believe that God made this virus happen or anything like that, but at least for me, that's just the piece that I've held on to. And the hardest thing for me is just to watch the hurricane happen around, you know, and just feel so heartbroken for people who are losing families.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who lost his aunt to the virus.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and to see people, you know, suffer from this, and not just from the virus, but from the fallout, and to lose their livelihood and lose everything. I mean, that is heartbreaking, and I don't really know what to do either, because there's only so much I can do. Can't fix the economy.
And the idea of letting go is, it makes me think, you know, when you have no control, what else can you do? When you have, you know, when you literally can literally, figuratively, absolutely not do anything about it. I guess other than you can control what you do. You know, you can control how you act. But on the bigger picture, if you can't do anything, then all you can do is sort of just, you know, I can't remember who it was, but someone talking about putting your problems into a bubble and blowing them away, just kind of letting them go and saying, I can't do anything about this. Do you feel...
And, you know, tipping my friends on Venmo when they're performing live, I'm like, I'm going to support you.
Yeah.
God, it's hard. Yes. So,
and doing that. And it's another conversation that's been come up. It's like the way through this is, and it might sound a bit of a formal word, but is sort of loyalty. Loyalty is the way out the other end of this. It's like, you know, what you've just said is loyalty to your friends, tipping them on Venmo, you know, loyalty to the media outlet that you don't want to see fold at the end of it, so use their advertisers, loyalty to those independent broadcasters who have Patreons that you want to support. It's loyalty to Air New Zealand when they come back, and, you know, when in New Zealand we're allowed to travel around going from Auckland to Queenstown because you can't go to Queensland. It's supporting those around you and having more of an outward looking expression rather than worrying about the self and how am I going to get through this. It is that the worry for humanity, how are we going to get through this? And I guess I wonder sometimes, and again, you know, I love talking about America. I love America in general and that, but there is this idea of individualism and, you know, the I in America, the you know, my rights, my independence, you know, I wonder if that becomes more difficult, you know, this idea of how do we pay for a public health system, and the rest of the world's kind of going, well, you just pay for it. You know, the rest of us do it. You don't even have to find the money. You just do it, you know, and people saying, you know, American right-wing politicians at the moment saying, if we give them a universal limited benefit, whatever it's called, the benefit for 6 months, they might expect help after that. And it's like, well, what's wrong with someone expecting help? You know, we've got to bind together or become bound together to get through this kind of thing.
I mean, those corporations get help, don't they?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
One of the
for the jobs that they give people, when really they're just replacing everyone with computers.
Yeah, well, Walmart is the biggest receiver of corporate welfare in America. They underpay their staff.
So crazy.
And
so I'd rather like have the government have that. But I would say, just kind of like what you were saying though, is that doesn't speak for all Americans, one thing that I feel like needs to get issued, the thing that needs to get addressed before the universal healthcare too, although maybe it just goes hand in hand, is just the fact that medicine is so expensive.
Yeah.
Here, that seems to be the big issue, is that why does a Band-Aid costs $600 in the first place. You know, it's like, wait a minute. And so there's no kind of standard one thing. And I know that that's probably just because being so highly privatized and pharmaceutical companies seem to hold such a thing. And then the problem, I mean, just comes back to just health in general. The food, the FDA and the food is has so much junk pumped into it here. And then, so everyone's eating food that makes them sick. And then they have drugs to feel better. But the problem probably comes down to food. And what they're eating is making them sick. And then vulnerable to the virus too. So it's just this kind of spiral.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I was talking to the Minister of Health in one of our podcasts probably 18 months ago. And I asked him a similar question about the cost of things in America. And he said one of the reasons that the cost of drugs and medical help in America is so expensive is because it's A, done insurance, and then B, costed out as a one-off. So in New Zealand, if we buy product X, our government buys 1 million units of it. And so obviously at 1 million units, it costs a lot less per unit. And then the government still subsidizes it before they pass it on to the consumer. In America, when you're a customer, or a patient is probably the right word, although customer in that system might be better. When you're a patient, then your medication is priced out as a one-off. And so obviously per capita, it's much more expensive. And of course we know, if you put a ding in your car, if you ding your front panel of your car and the panel beater gives you a quote for an insurance job, it's always 3 times the amount for a quote that if he does it for cash under the table sort of thing. So I think that when everything's paid for by insurance, it's always more because that's how insurance, I mean, it's disgusting, but that's how insurance companies add a zero. That's what they do. It's what the end user does to make their slice out of it as well.
Yeah.
I think David Clark, who's our Minister of Health, who's a little bit in the bad books at the moment based on some stuff he's done in this current climate, going off to the beach when he was supposed to be isolated. He just basically, because I asked him that question, I said, how do you explain to our American friends how we do it? And he went, we just decide to do it. That's it. It's like we just make a decision and we do it. And then when you see America, what did they find? Some odd $1 trillion for this current climate they're going through, like for all the supporting of businesses, like $1 trillion or something. And it's like, well, if you can find that for this world pandemic, why can't you find a portion of that for free healthcare? It's just a will to do it, and there doesn't seem to be the will to do it. Even amongst the so-called savior Democrats to the world, there's not a will for them to do it, so it won't get done. Which is sad. Which is sad for the people of America, even doubly at the moment, because what happens is people are losing their jobs. Massive amounts of people are losing their jobs, and with losing their jobs, a lot of them are then losing their health insurance. And so it's a double whammy. So they've lost their jobs, they've lost their income, and then if they get sick, they've got a $30,000 bill to get treatment for coronavirus. It's just, I don't know.
I don't know enough to really say too much about it. But they do have like Medicare and Medi-Cal for people who I think have recently lost their jobs and things like that. And so I think there are options, but again, like we were saying at the very beginning, it is state by state.
Yeah.
It's very different. So we just got covered by Medi-Cal because for the longest time I've been uninsured because I didn't know, and it was too expensive.
Really?
And too limiting for someone who tours a lot, because they're like, you have to pay $300 or $400 a month, but then you can only go to this doctor. And I was like, what if I get sick in Iowa? They're like, yeah, we don't cover that. It's like, why am I gonna pay $300-$400 to like not be covered everywhere? So but then I found out that I wasn't earning enough to. Right. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I got Medi-Cal now.
I had do you know the band The Lads? They used to be around in the friends from there. They used to. I'm mates with a couple of the guys that are there. They were living in Nashville for a long time, and they would leave every. I don't know what the time period was. Maybe it was 18 months, and have to come back to New Zealand as part of their visa. And then every time they came back to New Zealand, they'd get travel insurance, and so they were covered constantly as they lived in America by travel insurance out of New Zealand because their visa saw them as, I don't know whether it was an 18-month working visa or something like that. So, so that's how they did it. I guess people try and find their ways around it, sort of thing as well.
Yeah, totally. New Zealand healthcare is great. Japanese healthcare is also great.
Yeah. Hey, I'm interested, the comment you made about, the letting go, the prayer and the praying thing. You're in a part of the world that is seen as being not necessarily California or Los Angeles, but America as being quite sort of a Christian country. Certainly, a lot of what you hear coming out of America is based on, God and country and that sort of thing. Is there a vibe amongst people friends, people who are maybe also affiliated with, a belief in God that how do they approach what's going on at the moment? Is there any kind of blame going on for what is going, or is there any sort of, this is a place to find respite from what's going on at the moment? What does that feel like?
What do you mean?
The coronavirus stuff. Like, what are people looking to try and get through this? Is there are most people who are involved in sort of the church world or the belief in God world? I mean, that's assuming that you have some friends who run in those circles. I'm just saying, coming out of America, that seems to always be quite high on the topic. Is that, God and country? God is a big part of the community, a big part of society. Do you get a feeling as to is God put in the middle of this coronavirus situation at the moment? And if he or she, God is, what's the outcome? What are people thinking about it?
I can only speak for my community.
Yep.
So I've got no idea what's happening in the South, and in the very Christian states.
Right.
I only know, my church and how we are dealing with it right now. And so I guess for us, we're just trying to the church that I'm part of is just very justice driven. And so we're very much along the lines of, okay, we believe God's got us through this, and he is going to bless us through this. So what can we do to support? And so it's been really nice. We have like this ability for any of us really to get prayer, to connect on Zoom, to have community with each other every day of the week during this. And we have services online, which we watch together, and just address this anxiety, but to look to God through all of this, to provide for us and to see how we can serve and love people. So it's been really nice to kind of get these emails going. How are you? Do you need food? Do you need anything right now? How can we serve you? And if your financial situation is good, would you be willing to or able to support maybe other people in our church that aren't or can't? And then on top of that, we support different ministries around the world too, and people in poor countries. And so, how do we help them through this too? Because they're obviously having to go through stuff too. So that's where the focus is, I feel, right now. I know our church is very careful about, I guess, what we call the political spirit, which we believe is not from God. And so we often talk about how important it is for us, especially our pastor, especially if she sees stuff on Facebook or she sees people arguing on Facebook, she tries to shut that down pretty quickly, and not get so caught up in the politics of it and get so aggressive and angry at each other or blame each other. So
right.
The messages I've been hearing lately is like humility. It's really important that we have humility in this time, that we're not blaming people, that we're not accusing people of things, but to really just come beside people and love them and be Jesus, to the world, but receive that love too. So receive that love first, because you can't give out what you don't have, right? So
it sounds like you're talking about the more looking afters and widows and orphans aspect of the faith, being near people. Yeah, that's cool.
And just build community and love each other. I mean, I think that's what the church is supposed to do, and we can do that without through social distancing and through Zoom too. And I was watching, I don't know if you got to see it, but Rick Warren, who wrote a really big book called The Purpose-Driven Life, which has sold the most copies next to the Bible actually in the world, I think.
Right, wow.
And Rick Warren, so he kind of oversees, apparently there's a million pastors around the world or something who basically look to him for leadership.
Wow.
And so Anderson Cooper interviewed him, and I think they're good friends. And so Anderson Cooper interviewed him on CNN and said, hey, is Easter going to get canceled this year? And this was before Easter, and Rick Warren said, well, Easter happened 2,000 years ago, so it can't really be canceled. I mean, it's already happened. But no, I mean, we're just going to, he basically said the same thing. We can still love people, we can still give to the community, we can still connect through Zoom. But he said the most important thing that pastors need to do right now is protect the flock. And protecting the flock right now means not meeting in person.
Yep.
And to isolate and to find other ways to connect and support. So I think he's been training, or he's been offering a way to train a lot of people and a lot of churches who maybe aren't so tech savvy to build that so that they can connect online and have services online.
And I think that's another area you'll probably see explode after this is finished. Like every kind of not-for-profit, every church, has now got themselves set up that they can show their meetings or show their services or show their whatevers every Sunday, and you'll probably find that the number of broadcast and recorded messages and services will probably go up because people now have it in place because they have to. It's been a necessity of life for this period, so they've done it.
Yes.
Are you similar that when you see the I'm going to pick a brand because I think I saw one, the Southern Baptist minister talking about we're going to have church anyway, our people are going to come together. It kind of goes, oof, it's a bit cringy. What are they doing? Because it seems to be the opposite of the whole looking after the flock. I think it's such a good example to use is that literal flock and shepherd. Like, if the shepherd's job is to make sure the sheep all get home safely after they've been out grazing for the day. So yeah, it's a bit of a cringe fest when that happens. Yeah,
it's a little I think it's sad.
I also wonder there is that maybe again it's a bit of a British throwback, but maybe we in New Zealand are a little bit more okay. We'll do what we're told. It doesn't seem to be necessarily a trait. And obviously, I'm not saying all America, but through parts of America and some Americans seem to be much more open to saying, "Well, I'm American. You don't tell me what to do. Freedom, God, liberty, that sort of stuff."
Yeah.
So.
And I think there is a fear that drives a lot of people here of maybe the government oppressing them, partly to do with the history, I think, of, what they left behind in England and the UK and came to a land of freedom. And I think, so much, and this country is very free in so many ways, and then maybe less in others. But I mean, what is freedom too? Freedom comes with great responsibility. And so, I mean, I think in some ways you see Japan that has a lot of freedom, and I don't like that the government hasn't enforced, and I guess they don't feel like they're able to because of what happened with the war, and now the Constitution says the government can no longer dictate what the people do, so they can't actually force everyone on lockdown. And so, but if all the people are responsible, then there's less enforcement that needs to take place, people can drink alcohol outside in Japan, but they can't here. You can't go out to the beach and take alcohol with you here because people haven't been responsible. Whereas in Japan, people can do that because they haven't gone crazy. So, or sometimes they do, but it's not to the extremes. And so I feel like with freedom comes great responsibility. Are you going to prove that you are responsible enough to handle this freedom? That feels like my big question. And then in Japan, the fact that the virus didn't explode and take off meant that people were wearing masks, they were washing their hands, they were doing a lot of great things and clean, and they clean a lot just in general. You see people at the train station all the time cleaning things that already look clean. They're just always cleaning. So I think that has helped a lot and maybe continues to help even though they haven't locked down the country.
I wanted to ask you, I know we're coming up to a finish up time though. I wanted to ask you one other question, and it might be a bit of a tenuous link, so bear with me. Okay. Were you in Japan for the earthquake and the tsunami? You were living there at the time, but were you actually in Japan when that happened?
Yeah.
And I know that that was incredibly different, and I'm not comparing the two. But what I'm wondering is the vibe, the vibe. It's, I don't mean to be flippant. The
No,
feeling, the heart, the way people reacted to the aftermath of that, and the feeling they have. Do you get any sense that, we're going through a crisis right now where also thousands, if not millions, of people are going to die? Do you get a sense of any kind of similarity in the grief or the outpouring of what we're going through now, although acknowledging they're completely different? I don't want to compare the tragedies, but the way people are reacting to it afterwards. I'm interested for yourself, who was there and saw and went through it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? Can you see any parallels? Is there anything that feels similar to what we're going through now?
Yeah. I've even used it to describe I guess put people at ease if possible, because we felt it's the biggest earthquake of my life. Even though we were in Tokyo, we weren't at the epicenter, but it was the biggest earthquake I've ever been in. We were underground in a subway train. Wow. And which had stopped at a station, and then it shook, and then it shook a lot. So we got off the subway, but we just kind of was crouching on the wall as if that was going to do anything, and the subway was snaking. And then go on, the phones don't connect, but you go on Twitter, and then we walked 3 hours home, and the whole time we're just hearing people like, this is tsunami might be coming, be careful, and all the stuff, and then I think we saw a TV. Some people's eyes were glued to the TV, and then we'd stop by like 7-Elevens, and there would just be like glass smashed everywhere with people cleaning out wine bottles and things, and it was just really eerie and weird, and then we started to see people's eyes glued to the screen and started to see this tsunami, and it was terrifying. And I went up there, and then that week was really strange, and it really felt like this. It felt like, toilet paper ran out. Toilet paper and water, those are the two things that ran out. I guess everyone reacts in the same way.
Everyone's drinking and everyone's pooping.
I guess that's what it is. So, and so it was funny. One of my friends, I think, had a bunch of toilet paper, and so he made a toilet paper throne and put his baby on it and took a photo of it. It's like teasing everyone who couldn't buy any, but yeah, it was weird because of the nuclear reactor. So obviously, with this tragic thing had happened, thousands of people had died, and we saw it live. We saw it happen live, and we couldn't do anything about it.
Wow.
And the people who were at the epicenter had no idea what was happening. Really, I mean, I spoke to one girl who said she was in her car for 2 days.
Wow.
She's in the middle of nowhere. She was driving, and then she couldn't drive anywhere because all the roads were gone. And she didn't know that she didn't know that a tsunami had come and all this other stuff. She had no access to anything. So it was weird. And then the nuclear accident, there were just weird rumors going around, texts of like, just the weirdest things, fake news and fear. And everyone wore masks because we couldn't see, just like the virus, we couldn't see what was happening, and people started buying out all the radio like active sensors. I forgot what you call them, but the meters and
Geiger meters.
And a lot of my friends moved, actually. Some of my musician friends moved out of Tokyo and went and still to this day live out west because they don't want to be close to Fukushima. It was really similar, but in saying that, it really helped prepare me for this season, I think. And at that time, my eyes were glued to the news, and I was constantly absorbing the same news over and over and over,
right,
even though it was the same thing. So I started going a little crazy, which is why this time I'm just pacing myself, because it's not my job, obviously, to report. One of my friends works for a Japanese newspaper, and so she has to do this all day, every day. I feel so bad for her. She's like, I'm going crazy. But yeah, so I just pace myself now because that was just making me really anxious. But in saying that, the thing that makes me stronger now is to see what happened afterwards. And I went up to the tsunami-stricken areas a couple of months after. We continued to go up there, all my musician friends. We would play at schools and places, and there would literally be cars flipped on top of grave graveyards, and
Wow.
the smell of, it was just like fish everywhere. It was, and you'd see ships like shipwrecked inland, and it was just, I can't even forget those scenes, or the smells, all the sights. But the people came together like never before. The love, the compassion, people from all over the world came to help. Still to this day, some people still live there, and support those people. And so much good also came out of this, that I just believe that it's the same thing is happening, that it's so hard right now, but sometimes the world needs a wake-up call, and in some ways we all get it together. You know, the enemy is not, we're not each other.
Yeah.
The enemy is something that is not human.
Yeah.
So if anything, we can come together this time, which is really exciting to me, that we actually have a reason to come together and to support each other, love each other, fight with each other, and figure out and reassess what's really important in our lives and in our hearts, and go, okay, what is actually most important to me? It's my family, it's my loved ones, it's food, you know. It's not
toilet paper.
It's not having 10,000, it's not having 100,000 followers on whatever. It's not all that stuff. It's not even the shows and the tours. It's you know, yeah. So
you've been through an experience which enables you now to have hope for what's going to come next.
Yeah.
And I guess it's quite a nice place to wrap up, perhaps.
Yeah.
Anything
so.
anything else you want to say or do to finish off with? I mean, there'll be people watching both that are already sort of your followers and your fans. Is there anything you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, you know, I don't know when I'll get to go to New Zealand next, especially now that all this has happened. But I would love to, if anyone has listened to these stories and has never heard my music before, but you'd like to check it out, please come and find me. Kat McDowell. I'm on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and all sorts of things. Instagram, maybe even TikTok. I might be giving some origami tutorials, and I might do some free online workshops too. So please come find me and connect with me. Subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll let you know when the next workshop's happening.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely put all your links in the certainly on Facebook and send them out as well, so people can have a squiz and have a look. And I'm going to get my kids onto some of that origami when they're back with me next week, and we'll have some fun.
Yeah, that'd be so fun.
All right, Kat. Hey, you're a legend.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much for reaching out. It's been so great to reconnect with you and hear about what's happening in New Zealand from your perspective.
And look, we won't leave it another several years to connect again. I guess the thing that I realised, I was a bit of an arrogant, pompous prick, and I was like, I only want to do podcasts if the person's in the studio with me. You know, that's how I do it. It's got to be in person. And because you're now forced to change how you do things, I'm like, this ain't so bad. I can talk to people in Los Angeles and tomorrow Las Vegas and earlier on in London. And so, yeah, I've come down off my pedestal and thinking that means we can do this kind of thing whenever we want. So it's been a blast. Yeah. And thanks for giving us some time today, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you.